And good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining here today. So we're going to be talking today about personal effectiveness. And wait till I just move my screen on. There we go, personal effectiveness. Just before we start, I suppose I'd just like to introduce myself and LMI. So my name is Maurice Cullen, and I worked within the marketing area for maybe 25 years, heading up marketing teams in lots of different organizations. And for the last 6 years, I've been involved with Leadership Management International and have represented Leadership Management International here in Ireland. So just a little few comments on who we are. We're a performance improvement business. We're involved in people development. We work with individuals to help them develop to their full potential. That's our aim. And we're an international group. We're operating in about 80 odd countries, I think, at this stage. And really, we run a kind of a tested and proven process to help people get more out of themselves, and to basically help people to achieve more, I suppose, is fundamentally what we're talking about. So look, today I'm going to be talking to you about some of the principles of personal effectiveness. What I'd like you to do is to grab a pen and paper, because I'm going to ask you to write a few things as we go through this morning, because I'd love you to have something tangible coming out of this session, something that you can actually refer back to. So do grab a pen and paper. Saoirse will be circulating the slides later on, so you don't have to worry about taking down some of the slides that I have, but maybe make some comments of your own, so grab a pen and paper. I'd also ask you to have a look at the chat box. So you all know how to use that, I'm absolutely sure. So put in any of your comments, thoughts, questions as we go through. And Saoirse has said she'll help me just kind of managing that as we go through it. So she's going to interrupt me and get me to pass some comment on some of your thoughts and questions as we go through the session. But we will also have time at the end. So we will finish up at 20 or a quarter to 1. And that will allow us time for some proper questions and answers at that stage. So let's have it as interactive as we can. It's a largish group, so it's just easier to manage through the chat box. So look, moving on and just kind of starting off the session proper then, I want to give you just some food for thought, okay? And the first thing I'd like you to think about is this quote. And it's a fundamental kind of tenet, I suppose, of LMI and what we do. And this is that the successful person is the average person focused. Okay, so I'd like you just to think about that for a moment. The successful person is the average person focused. So we're not saying that the successful person is the person with the highest IQ. We're not saying the successful person is the person with the highest EQ. We're not saying it's the person with the best education or the skill sets or whatever it is. We're actually getting you to think this afternoon now about successful people being focused, okay, with focus being the key word. So in terms of illustrating that, maybe each of you think about someone who you know, someone in your life who's successful. So I don't think about Richard Branson or someone. I want you to think about someone who's a real person in your life, whether it's a work colleague, whether it's one of your family, whether it's a mother or a father, whether it's someone in your local sports club. But just think about someone who's successful. And when you're thinking about them, just think, are they focused? Are they, are they dogged? Are they, really resilient in terms of what they're doing? And I think you'd probably answer yes to that question. And that's an interesting thing to think about then, isn't it? That this kind of doggedness and focus is a key characteristic of successful people. So if we think about that kind of focus on what we're doing, I want to give you a second bit of food for thought, which is what you know versus what you do. Okay, and it's a key thing that we talk to our clients about is what we call this application gap, which is the gap between what you know you should be doing and what you actually do day in, day out. And I find it's kind of an interesting one, because I know that certainly for many years when I worked in the corporate world, I was always chasing the new thinking. I was chasing the new thoughts. I was chasing the new trends, because I thought that was important. But actually what I was forgetting about doing was applying what I actually knew already. So here's the thing. All of us know, we talk about personal effectiveness. All of us know that we should be planning. All of us know that we should be prioritizing. All of us know that we should be goal setting. All of us know that we should be delegating. but do we actually do those to the best of our ability? Sure, we all do some planning and some prioritizing, of course we do, but do we actually focus on that and do it well? And I think probably the answer is we can all improve. We can all do better on that. So really what I want you to start thinking about is doing the basic things properly with focus and energy. So make sure that you're planning properly, prioritizing properly, and goal setting properly. And these are the things that are going to make a difference. And we close that application gap, the gap between what you know and what you actually do. And to have a think about this as a final bit of food for thought here is, simple disciplines repeated over time will create success for you. But the flip side of that coin is that simple mistakes repeated over time will actually create failure. Okay, and that's something to pause for thought, isn't it? Really, when you think about that, is simple mistakes repeated over time will create failure for us. But on the positive side of this, if we can just tweak those and apply good principles and good disciplines to what we're doing, that these simple disciplines repeated over time will create a successful environment for us. And really, that's what we in LMI work on, and what I want to talk to you about this morning is helping you to identify the building blocks and the behavior patterns that will deliver success for you. Okay, so what are your building blocks? What are your behavior patterns that are going to deliver success for you? Okay, so with that in mind, I just want to talk to you about a couple of kind of key things. Okay, and we're going to start with time. Okay, and time is the biggest common denominator between us all. So we all come from different backgrounds, we all work in different environments, we all have different abilities, we all have different capabilities, we all have different support systems. The one thing that we have in common, that everybody on this call has in common, is time. We all have 168 hours every week. And again, I suppose if you think about people who are around you, who you might admire or look up to, and they're all working from the same amount of time as you have. And sometimes, we think of these people and say, how do they get all that stuff done? And the reason they get it done is that they know what's important and they know what isn't important, and they focus. We're back to this word focus. They focus on what's going to deliver for them. So in terms of looking at time then and how we can best use it, a question for you is what drives you every day? What dictates your day? Is it urgent things or is it important things? Okay, so is it urgent or is it important? So, are these things urgent? Your inbox, probably all of you have dozens of emails sitting in your inbox at the moment. Are they urgent? They probably are, I suppose. Well, they might be. Ringing telephones, instant messaging, DMs, whatever it is. Someone walking up to your desk. Are these urgent? Yeah, maybe they are. But a more important question is, actually, are they important? So are these important things for you to be responding to? And when I ask, are they important? I suppose it begs the question, what do I mean by important? And fundamentally, I mean, focusing on results. Does responding to these things deliver on your results? And does it deliver on your vision, on your mission, on your purpose, on your values, on your goals? Because this is where you should be focusing your attention on things that actually deliver on this. And it leads us into a kind of a time management matrix, which I want to talk to you briefly about, which is called the Eisenhower matrix, because it's attributed to Dwight Eisenhower, who apparently once said that what's urgent is seldom important, and what's important is seldom urgent. Okay, so it sounds a little bit confusing, but it's led to this matrix, and it's a really interesting matrix to look at, and we're going to just look at that for a moment now. And so it splits the world into kind of a binary thing of something is either important or not important. It's either urgent or it's not urgent. Okay, so it's a simplification of the world, of course, but I think it's actually a useful simplification. And if you start to use this matrix in terms of how you think, I think you will find it of use to yourself. So if you look at the top left, that's if you're spending your time in that top left quadrant 1, you're working on things which are urgent and which are important. So that kind of sounds right, doesn't it? It's important to me in my role and it's urgent. So yeah, I need to be doing that. So it sounds as if it makes sense that you're working in quadrant 1. But the downside of working there is that you are actually in reactive mode when you're in quadrant one. And the reason you're reactive here is because the item has already become urgent. So you have a deadline that you're working against. And when you have a time constraint, you are always somewhat reactive. You might get it done pretty well, but it's unlikely that you're giving it your best shot. So rather than working in quadrant one, we really want to be working in quadrant two where we can. And that's working on important things for us, but we're getting to them before they've become urgent. And because they haven't become urgent yet, we can approach them in a proactive way, and we actually can give them our best shot. And I suppose, when you think about this, if you ask me to write something now, an answer to a question now, I write it down, and I probably have a pretty good go at it. But if I'm allowed to kind of sleep upon it and have a look at it again tomorrow, without doubt, I'll go back and change a few sentences, change a few words, and improve it. And really, that's what we're talking about. When you have a little bit more time, you can actually improve your work and get a better result. So that's up in quadrant two, okay? Quadrant three is where you're working on urgent things which are non-important. And this is typically called the busy fool, okay? And we've all heard that phrase, the busy fool. And when I say something that's non-important, what I mean is that it's non-important to you personally in your role. Okay, I'm not talking, it may be important for your organization, it may be important for your business, but it's not important for you personally to do it. And this is, this quadrant can also be called the quadrant of, or the zone of seduction. Okay, and the reason it's called the zone of seduction is you can easily get seduced into spending your time in this area, because let's say you're in your working day and someone. It's me, and someone comes up and says, "Hey, Maurice, can you give me a hand with something here? Because I'm stuck and I'm in a bit of a bind. Can you give me a dig out?" So I say, "Sure," and I spend some time and spend half an hour sorting out that issue for that person. Well, what happens is that person says, "Maurice, thanks a million. You're great. Listen, you've saved my day. Thanks a million. You're a great fella. Thank you." And they head off and they say, have a cup of coffee with someone. Say, "Oh, listen, Maurice saved the day this morning. He was fantastic." So it all feels good, doesn't it? They're saying I'm great, I'm feeling great because I've had more knowledge of them and I'm helping them. So that makes me feel kind of elevated and I'm feeling good. We're all feeling good. The problem is that I'm working on things I shouldn't be working on and I'm not doing my job. So I'm in this busy fool box, okay? And often you're in this box if you've had a really busy day, you're kind of going home frazzled at the end of the day and you ask yourself, geez, what did I get done today? You've probably been in zone 3, okay? Zone 4 then is kind of an escape. This is if you're working on stuff that's non-important and non-urgent, and really primarily you're in here if you're taking a break. If you've had a busy time, you take a break, you kind of flop into this zone. So I suppose what I want you to think about when you're looking at this matrix then is that you'll need to start saying no to this busy work. Okay, busyness is not good. You're looking to be effective, not busy. So say no to this busy work. Do more work in quadrant 2. Okay, try and get a step change into what you're doing so that you're actually working on things before they become urgent. And obviously, the more time you spend up here in zone 2, the less time you have to spend in zone 1, because you actually get into the stuff before it becomes urgent. So by just making a one-off adjustment to how you're working, spending more time in zone 2, there's less time to spend in zone 1. Okay, and of course, 4 is a choice, isn't it? That's up to you how much time you want to spend there. And I suppose, always when we're in that kind of zone 4, it's just being aware of the amount of time. So let's just say, I finished this conversation with you guys this morning and I reward myself by going and getting a cup of coffee and having a look at Twitter or something. That's fine because I'm choosing to do that. It only becomes a problem if it's kind of an hour later and I'm still doing it. now I've kind of flopped, haven't I? And I haven't kept my own self-discipline in terms of what I'm doing. So when we look at that kind of way of looking at life, things being urgent or non-urgent, important or non-important, it begs us this question: what are the important things, and what should I be kind of planning to be spending my time on? What is my priority? How do I go about prioritizing my day? So this is the one I want you to think about now, is the Pareto Principle. So you've all heard of this. This is the 80-20 rule, it's often called. And what it says is that characteristics for any of us, no matter what role. So everybody who's on this call, I think can say this with a fair degree of confidence. There are a small number of activities that you do that over deliver your outputs. So there's probably 20% of what you actually do give you 80% of your result. And the flip side, of course, of that is that there's 80% of what you're doing day in, day out that's only giving you 20% of your outputs, only giving you 20% of your results. So if we take this 20% of activities giving us 80% of results, the question for you this morning is, what are your high payoff activities? What are the activities that really deliver for you in your role? Okay, do you know what they are? Do you know what those things are? So this is where you grab the pen and paper that I said before. What I would like each of you now to do is to take out a pen and paper and to write down what you feel are the top 5 activities that get you the results in your job. Okay, what are these activities for you? A way to think about this is, what are the activities that are most directly responsible for earning your income? Okay, so why are you employed? Why are you employed doing your job? So I'm going to actually give you just 2 or 3 minutes to write down these activities, okay? And you'll notice that I keep saying the word activity, and because I want you to write down activities, not responsibilities, because responsibilities tend to be vague and tend to have lots of wiggle room on it. So say you had, I just say your responsibility was managing the team, okay? That's a responsibility. So how do you manage the team? You manage the team by having, let's just say, a one-to-one half-hour meeting with each team member every week, okay? So your high payoff activity is your 30-minute one-to-one meeting with each team member. Now, when you phrase it like that, it's very easy to know whether you're doing it or not. If you leave it as a responsibility, managing the team, it's so vague, it's impossible to know whether you're doing it. So what I want you to do is to state your high payoff activities in a way that there's no wiggle room in it for you. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes now just to write down your high payoff activities, okay? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, okay? So write down your high payoff activities for me now, please, in the next 2 minutes. Okay, that's not quite 2 minutes, but I think it's enough time just to give you a feel for the exercise. So again, this is something I would encourage you to look in more detail after today's session. So my question for you is, was that an easy task to do or otherwise? It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, asking you what are the things that really work for you in your role? What are your high payoff activities in your role? It's a deceptively easy question. It's the kind of a question that a 12-year-old might ask you. Your nephew or niece might ask you that. What are the important things you do in your job? And what I have found working with people over the last 6 years is that most people struggle to answer this question. They struggle to write down what their high payoff activities are, and actually typically it takes people a couple of weeks to work this through. But when you think about it, that's crazy, isn't it? Because if you're not clear what your high payoff activities are, how can you ever hope to be focused in the way I was talking about earlier this afternoon? If success comes from focus, if you don't know what your high payoff activities are, you can't actually be focused. So,
sorry, Maurice. We just have two comments in the chat. So one from me saying, great activities, but definitely challenging to define the most important activities. And then we've Matthias as well. And sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it was not necessarily an easy question, but very thought-provoking.
Yeah, and thanks for interrupting me, Sarah. Yeah, look, it's such an easy question to ask, and it's such a difficult question to answer, isn't it? What are your high payoff activities? But without them, we can't have focus. And it's kind of crazy, I think, because a lot of us have very complicated setups in our work environment. We've all sorts of Gantt charts, we've this, we've that, we've online diaries, we've 1,001 tools and apps and all sorts of things we use, but we can't answer the basic question of what are the high payoff activities in my role. And when you think about your high payoff activities, the next question, as on the chart there, is what's their priority and how much time should you spend on each of them? But I suppose, stepping back from that, just to have a think, when you succeed in writing down and knowing what your high payoff activities are, the question is, how much time are you spending doing those high payoff activities? And this is where we get to the thing that I was talking about earlier, is that sometimes small tweaks to your behavior can have a very big influence on what you do. So for instance, when I work with clients over a period of weeks, we actually do an exercise to work out how much time they do spend on their high payoff activities. Most people who I work with spend less than half of their time on high payoff activities. Okay, so they're spending less than 50% of their time on high payoff activities. So in other words, half of their time is spent on fairly non-productive work. So if you think about that, let's just assume you're spending 50% of your time on high payoff activities, and you may well be spending less, by the way. But let's just say you spend 50% of your time. If you can go from 50 to 55% of your time focused on high payoff activities, that's going to get you at least a 10% improvement in your productivity. So small changes can make a very big difference. Okay, that's really what I want to focus you on. So have a think about your high payoff activities, particularly if you found that exercise challenging that I asked you and you kind of didn't even know where to start. That you need to take some time out and think about that. Okay. So next thing I just want to get you to think about are low payoff activities, because we talk about Pareto, the 80-20 rule. So what are the 80% of things that are only delivering 20% of your results? Again, it's helpful for you to know what these are. And the reason it's helpful for you to know what these are is that when you recognize that they're low payoff, it encourages you to spend less time doing them. Okay. So again, I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes, and we don't have time to spend as much as we should on this, but I really want you to ask yourself the question, what are your low payoff activities? And I define low payoff activities that are worth less than the value of your time. Okay, and the question is, how much time are you spending on these? So you'll know from what I said a moment ago on high payoff activities, most people are spending 50% or more of their time on low payoff activities. But just see if you can write down in front of you now on a page, just for a couple of minutes, what are your low payoff activities? Typically these are maybe administrative type of stuff, so it's not necessarily stuff that doesn't need to be done. Every job has low payoff activities associated with it, but it's just work that doesn't need as much of your time. You need to minimize the time that you spend on it. So let's just see if you can write down things that particularly recurring things that happen daily or weekly or monthly, that eat into your time but don't actually deliver on your vision or mission or purpose. So let's see if you can write down a few of those for me now. So maybe you just do that. I'll give you a minute or two. So I see just in the chat box there, Heather makes a really good point in terms of the cost of doing a task. So she's an exec assistant, she tells us, and if she does a task that takes it off her executives list, it's a saving for the company. And that's exactly the way to think about this. Is if I'm doing a role and I'm being paid, let's say I'm being paid 100, if someone else can do it for 50, that's a 50 euro saving for the business. So typically, this idea of the way to think about it is the person who can effectively do a task who's paid less, the least amount in the company should be doing it. So you always look to have the people operating to the maximum of their ability. So if I'm capable of doing a 50 euro a day or an hour job, that's what I should be doing, and I shouldn't be spending my time on tasks that are worth less than that. So that's a really important point. Yeah, Matthew's saying a barrage of meetings are often low payoff. Typically, when I do this exercise with people, they will tell me that meetings are low payoff. So here's the thing then, Matthew, and everyone else on the call. Do you have to go to all the meetings that you're invited to? It's a basic question that I ask people, and hand on heart, maybe there are some of them that you can withdraw from. Meetings are the biggest time suck for anybody, and we get into this idea of thinking we have to go to a meeting if we're invited to it. But guess what? You don't. Look, you have to use your business mouse. Now, I'm sure when your boss tells you to go to a meeting, you may have to go to it. But there are certainly other meetings that come onto your agenda that you may well be able to extricate yourself from. And if you can, that's what you should be doing. Yeah, and there's other comments there about emails and stuff. Emails are often a way that we just distract ourselves, we're not feeling kind of up for it really this morning, and we'll just spend some time doing emails. You're kind of opting out a little bit maybe then. So look, on low payoff activities, the reason that I kind of want you thinking about low payoff activities is that when you're really clear what your high payoff activities are, and when you're really clear on what your low payoff activities are, what that allows you to do is kind of do the triage of workload as it comes in. So triage is the idea. If you go to the accident and emergency department of your local hospital, you walk in the door, someone will have a look at you. And if you are having a heart attack, they'll immediately bring you in and treat you. And if you've gone in with a sore knee, they'll leave you sitting on the seat for 6 hours until they get to you. So it's that kind of approach of triage, which I think is helpful for you to think about in your business life. So that your inbox gets flooded with stuff every day, okay? And you need to look at that inbox and decide, is this worth my attention, time, effort, or is this something which I really need to minimize my time and effort on? And when you triage in that way, it can be very, very helpful in terms of your effectiveness. So you put your high payoff activities, stuff that's going to deliver for you, into a part of your day that you're full of energy and you've got a good energy cycle. And then maybe you put your low payoff activities towards the end of the day when you're in a bit of an energy slump, and that can be very effective in terms of what you're doing. Okay, look, that's enough, I think, for the moment on high payoff and low payoff. I want to move on for a moment, if I can, and I want to talk about JP Morgan's guaranteed formula for success. So I'm going to get you to think, if you can remember what that is, as I take a drink of water. So I don't know if anyone knows what JP Morgan. So JP Morgan, obviously the famous financier, and he had a guaranteed formula for success, which he used throughout his career, and he was good enough to share with everybody. Okay, and guess what it was? It was as follows. What he said was, every morning, write a list of important things that need to be done that day, and then do them. Okay, so every morning, write a list of important things that need to be done that day and do them. So again, we're back to the basics here, guys, aren't we? And so, genuinely, this is what he talked about as his guaranteed formula for success. And really all that is focus, isn't it? Planning what he needs to do and then doing it, not allowing himself to get distracted by other things. And I want to talk to you about planning for a minute then, because we talked about time as being the common denominator for everybody, the 168 hours a week. We know what our high payoff activities are now and our low payoff activities. So how do we plan to spend more time in high payoff activities? And how do we plan to make sure that we're scheduling our time to do the right things? And part of that is down to this idea of just planning, writing down what needs to be done each day and then actually doing it. So I want to talk to you about the concept of 10 magic minutes, okay? And 10 magic minutes are what are required to plan the day for yourself ahead of time. So either 10 minutes before you finish work in the evening where you plan the following day, or if you're a morning person, it's 10 minutes before you start your daily work. And the key to this here is that you take 10 minutes before you even look at your inbox, okay? If you look at your inbox, you're lost. You've lost your agenda already. You've handed away your control. So before you open your inbox in the morning, take 10 minutes to say, okay, Maurice, what are the 2 most important things I need to get done today? How long are they going to take me? And when am I going to do them? So I say, okay, do you know what? Today I need to ring Saoirse because I've been putting off doing that for the last week. It's going to take 15 minutes and I just need to do it, bite the bullet and do it. So, okay, I'm going to do that between 10 and 10:15 tomorrow morning. And okay, the other thing I need to do is I need to review that paper that someone sent me, and I've been putting it off because it looks kind of boring. So that's going to take half an hour, and I'm going to do that between 2:30 and 3 in the afternoon. So you block in those two time slots in your diary, and then you guard them in your diary in the same way that you would block out a meeting with an external person. This is what I tend to say to people. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? That if we have a meeting with an external person or with a client or something, we block it in our diary and we wouldn't dream of getting in the way of it. But when we have a time scheduled in with ourselves, we allow people into that time all of the time. So what I want you to do is to start thinking in a different way. Flip a switch in your brain and say, I'm going to make these 2 time slots in my day as important, and I'm going to prioritize them in the same way I would prioritize a meeting with an external person. And all it takes is 10 minutes in the day to think that through. Okay, so there you're kind of your 10-minute planning, all right, and that gives you your kind of your daily goals. But I suppose when we think about goals, we should be thinking a little bit longer term on that also, shouldn't we? What are my goals for this month, for this quarter, for this year? So we're in January. It's a good time to start thinking about some of this stuff, isn't it? What do I want to achieve between now and Easter? What do I want to achieve between Easter and the summer? What do I want to have got done before next Christmas? So what are these goals? What should we be setting ourselves? And again, I come back to my very first slide. We all know we should set goals, but really, how good are we at doing it? Maybe not as good as we might like to think. So why set goals? I think one of the reasons that we should set goals is that when we don't have clearly defined goals, we get into a routine and we become loyal to performing daily acts of trivia. And just think about that for a moment before you dismiss it. I would be willing to bet that if I was to talk to you guys individually, I would be able to unearth daily acts of trivia that you do, which you're just doing because you're in a routine and you're in a kind of just a rut, and you're just doing them because you're filling the day, and it's not an effective way of working. But when you have clearly defined goals, it pulls you out of those ruts, and you can actually really move forward with a little bit of confidence. So when I talk about setting goals, what do I mean? I suppose work goals are kind of obvious, aren't they? We probably all have them. But actually, what I'd like you to do is to set goals across your life. Okay, not just in your working life. And sometimes people rail a bit at this, and they kind of think, "Oh, look, my personal life is my personal life. I'm saying I have goals at work, but I don't want to be setting them in my personal life." So I'd just like to challenge your thinking on that a little bit this afternoon, because what I'd say to you is that when you set goals across your life, it can open up a whole different world of opportunity for you. And when you set goals in your non-working life, they tend to help and aid and abet you achieving goals in your working life. So we talk about this concept of a wheel of life, and really what we do is we look at 6 different sectors of your life, 6 different areas of your life. And these are all, although they're split out obviously here as being separate, clearly they're not separate because they're all interlocking and overlapping. But again, it's a simplification and an interesting way to think about your overall life. So, you've got kind of financial and career there at the top, which is the one I think probably a lot of us think about in a structured fashion quite often. And so that's perhaps kind of obvious enough in a way. But, we also have mental and educational. So, here's the thing, have you participated? This is some things to think about in this sector. Have you participated in some formal learning in the last year? If not, should you? I don't know. It's a question for you. Do you schedule regular time for studying and reading and stuff like that? I don't know. Something to think about. Physical and health. What are your lifestyle habits like? Are they conducive to good health and performance? Do you have a scheduled program for exercise and so forth? Do you get enough sleep at night? All this kind of stuff. So that's your physical and health. You got social and cultural. Maybe it's things like, do you regularly participate in social and cultural events? Have you got a network of friends? Do you nurture existing friendships, or do you let them kind of fall behind? A lot of people during this awful pandemic have let friendships lapse a little bit. So maybe you need to dial that up a little bit. Do you seek out new friends? Spiritual and ethical, hugely important sector for some people, not so much for others. But are you happy with the amount of time you spend in reflection or prayer or meditation or whatever it may be? And so in all of these things, there's no right and wrong answer. It's just what's right and wrong for you. And obviously family and home, I don't think we talked about that. But are you happy with the time you spend in your home life? Are you happy with your relationships? Are you happy with what you bring to those? And it's just to think about each of these areas. And I suppose that's the important thing, is we think about these. So you don't have to have goals in all 6 areas, but I think it's at least important that you think, do I want to have a goal in that area or not? So in terms of just getting us to think about that, what I'd like you to do now is to give yourself a score from 1 to 10 in each area of your life. Okay, so for family and home, if you're really unhappy with that at the moment, score yourself 1. If you're really happy with it, score yourself 10. And if you're somewhere in the middle, score yourself 5. So just go with a figure off the top of your head. Okay, and for each of those 6 sectors, just on the page in front of you there, just give yourself a score from 1 to 10. So if you just do that now for me, so I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. It won't take you longer than that. Okay, so if you've all scored yourself there, 1 to 10 on each of those, and the question for you is then, what would it take to move you up 1 point? So if you've scored yourself social and cultural, if you scored yourself 5 out of 10, let's say, what would it take to move yourself up to 6 out of 10? So in that example, it might be, do you know what? I'm going to meet 1 friend for lunch every week, or I'm going to meet somebody for a cup of coffee once a week or every second week, or whatever it may be. So these don't have to be all big, important, kind of profound things. They can be simple steps. So what would it take to move you up 1 point in one of those areas that you're kind of interested in or are concerned about, perhaps? So that's an interesting way to think about goals and what you might like to set yourself. So look, I'm going to bring this to a close in a minute because I want to give some time for some interaction and chat. But I suppose just to say to you, we've talked about understanding your high payoff and your low payoff activities, taking time out to plan your day, setting some goals, daily goals, and then broader goals I've just mentioned there. Goals in other areas of your life and goals that you're going to set for the next month or quarter ahead. But I suppose it's worth saying that when you set the goal, that's really just the beginning of it, because you need to then put a plan there, because otherwise it's just a thought, isn't it? It's just a wish. So it's really all about taking those goals and actually doing something with them. getting some process to achieve those goals and to make sure that you see them through. And because setting the goal is the easy bit, the goal setting is the easy bit, the goal getting is the hard bit. So goal getting is the important thing. So, within LMI, we have a proven process for this, which if anyone is interested, I could take you through. But, if you're not, just Google goal getting processes, and I'm sure you'll get plenty of hits when you do that. So find a system that works for you, that is actually going to put into action this. So you're taking from a thought on a page to something that you're actually doing, I suppose is what I'm talking about. So to say to you, I started with this slide that the successful person is the average person focused. And really, that's what we've been talking about this morning, isn't it? Focusing your time, making sure you're spending your time on the right things and not allowing yourself to get distracted by what essentially obviously are just distractions. And setting goals for yourself, planning, setting goals, prioritizing, thinking about your life in a broader way. People who talk about work-life balance, I can't get my head around that at all, because work and life are not separate things on a balance. Work is an important part of your life. So really, we're talking about life balance. So when we talk about life balance, then are you happy with where you are in these? Or are there some other kind of goals that you want to set to get that in shape? So look, just to say to you, if anyone is interested in finding out a little more about this, I'm very happy to speak to anyone. And indeed, I'm happie to give people a free consultation with no kind of strings attached. And if you are interested in following up, you can contact me at maurice@lmi.ie.